This episode of the Cult Popture podcast was brought to you by our Patreon. If you want to tell us which films we should watch, get up to 2 extra exclusive podcasts a month, give us something to talk about in the post-credit scenes at the end of each episode, or even contribute to the discussion in the episode itself, then please consider joining the cult and donating at www.patreon.com/cultpopture. Do you want to start or should I?
Yeah, let's both start. Let's use this as the start. And
okay, well then I started.
Well, you threw it to me though to take the
And a leader
reins.
is not someone who does something for the first time. A leader, true leadership, is someone who does something for the second time. Thus,
but louder.
saying saying to the world, look, this thing, I accept it. You know.
Yeah, great leaders of our time have done that, such as Mahatma Gandhi.
Yeah.
John F. Kennedy.
Yeah.
And, of course, John Rambo.
I thought you were going to say Richard Nixon. Yes, welcome along, everybody, to Film Franchise Fortnights on the Cult Popture podcast. This is our show, Film Franchise Fortnights, where once a fortnight, only once, it's enough, we watch a different film franchise. We've been going for, this is, I think, our 7th season, which is only just 5 to 6 years because of
yeah, what?
It's our season 7, but we haven't been doing it for 7 years. We've been doing it for
it's still season 6. It will be because we haven't had the season break yet.
You're totally right. So this is our show where we watch and discuss different film franchises, the likes of Indiana Jones, the likes of Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. That's an old one, but it's a great example of the rubber banding we do from ones you know about to ones that your older sister was obsessed with in 2008. And this franchise, this fortnight, this one was selected randomly, I believe, by our franchise randomizer. This one is Rambo. That's how they say it in the film. Whenever someone's referring to him, they go Rambo.
It's what he says when he kills someone. So he ends up saying a lot by the end of the
he says it. He doesn't say it once in the first film, but then in the last one, he's just saying it all the time. So if you haven't seen Rambo, if you have seen Rambo, I imagine this will be a fun episode, regardless if this is your first time.
Well, I think all these episodes are fun.
I agree. I think everything we've ever done has been fun. Except for Kung Fu Panda. No. Just had to pick a random one to make fun of, and picked probably one of the most
probably the best episode of our podcast.
I don't know about that. Okay.
Well, I mean, it's not for me to say. But
I reckon I remember 0 about our Kung Fu Panda episode. Do you ever?
I remember where I was sitting when I recorded it because it was
Same.
like a brief period of time where I had to record in the lounge on a laptop. It was before I got a computer. And it was in that sort of period of time, just after you left Auckland, and we recorded together, but before I'd bought a computer, and so I had a laptop, and I hadn't had a station set up yet.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's funny that I do remember. I remember where I was when we recorded every podcast, which is what helps me place them in my mind because I move so frequently.
Same, exactly the same. I can tell you if certain episodes were recorded before others because I remember where I was for every. Give me a franchise, I'll tell you which house I was in.
Nightmare on Elm Street.
Nightmare on Elm Street. I was in. Do I want to say the name of my two houses? One house before this one.
Yeah, we did it twice. So
yeah, I was talking about
once we did it together.
The Redux. Yeah.
I remember I moved during the MCU as well.
Oh, did you? I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, you did at the time.
I'm sure I did.
Yeah, so this is House Franchise Fortnights, where we discuss the houses we've lived at. Now, we are here to talk about Rambo. Or you might know it as the First Blood franchise.
Do you know it as that? Is that what people call this?
No, they might. So this currently consists of 5 films. That is First Blood, which came out in 1982, Rambo First Blood Part 2, which came out in 1985, Rambo 3 in 1988, Rambo in 2008, but as you might know it as John Rambo in certain territories, and Rambo Last Blood in 2019. So, all 5 films star Sylvester Stallone as the titular Rambo Balboa. No, I'm just kidding. John Rambo, the weirdly just, John J. Rambo. That's his name. Last name is significantly cooler than his first name. Sorry to all the Johns out there. It's based on a novel, which was also called First Blood, which didn't have any sequels. You'll find out why when we get to the plot of the first film and how it deviates from the book. But yeah, we'll just dive right into the first film, 1982. What is First Blood about?
First Blood is about a guy named John Rambo, who is a Vietnam War vet, and some years after the war has ended, he goes to this little nowhere town in middle America to visit the last surviving member of his crew from Vietnam, only to discover that guy has also died of cancer that is believed to have been related to, like, the Agent Orange gave him cancer. And so while Rambo is walking around this town minding his own business, the cop played by Brian Dennehy, who I know from a South Park joke and nothing else.
And I know from First Blood.
There you go. He shows up and he's like, hey, we don't take kindly to your type around here, which isn't... this feels like something that was supposed to be obvious. I think he means like war vets.
No, he means drifters.
Drifters, right, okay. But he mentions his American flag on his jacket.
Yeah, so like when he picks him up and says, we don't like your kind, he calls him a drifter, and so that's kind of the idea. Right. It's a very... Hope, Washington is the name of the town. It's a very sort of small town, and so, they don't want outsiders, I guess.
Right, because I thought the implication was they don't like war vets, and I was like, I knew these movies like had a right-wing swing, but everything I've been told my whole life about small-town America is not that they're too liberal. That is not what I'd come to understand.
Well, I think is what and it's kind of the plot of the film, is the way that America treated vets from the Vietnam War. Because a lot of Americans rejected the war and stuff like that. It's probably as good a time as any to put out a warning that we're not really taught much about the Vietnam War. Like we're told these things, and it's the plot of Rambo, or the plot of First Blood, I should say. But yeah, we sort of, other than like I guess the Post. And then even that was pretty densely packed with information, so I didn't retain a lot of it about what happened with the Vietnam War. But my understanding is, basically the vets came back, and especially, and it was a transformative time in the US as well. But people sort of came back and didn't recognize the America they were coming back to. Yeah, got a lot of good music though. A lot of good music.
A lot of what's it called?
Creedence Clearwater Revival.
One
interesting thing though, and that's in the book, that's not in the movie, is that the Brian Dennehy's character resents Rambo like even more so, because he's a vet of the Korean War, which is like this largely forgotten thing, and so he sees Rambo as like, you were a vet of like the Great War everyone was talking about, and we got left by. So he has, like, he feels even more rejected by society than Rambo does.
Right. Okay. Interesting. So anyway, he's like, I'll give you a lift out of town, and when he takes him out of town, Rambo turns back around and wanders back into town, thinking like, I should be allowed to walk through town to get something to eat, or et cetera, et cetera. He ends up getting arrested for not really anything, and when they sort of manhandle him, he kind of goes crazy and escapes into the
severe PTSD.
And sort of triggered. Yeah, he escapes into the neighboring mountainside, where a manhunt ensues to find this Rambo guy, and toward the beginning of the manhunt, a slightly more unhinged cop tries to shoot Rambo to death from a helicopter, only to fall out of the helicopter himself, and it looking like Rambo killed him specifically.
He's not responsible for his death.
How so?
Well, Rambo throws a rock at the helicopter, and that's what knocks him out. But he deliberately took off his seatbelt to try kill Rambo better.
Yeah.
And Rambo was very much just like, leave me alone.
Yeah, and in a tradition that I now hold true for all Rambo movies, even the good one, quote unquote, the first one, is you can probably stop paying too much attention after that part, because the rest is just sort of this big, massive manhunt for Rambo, and it turns into Predator for a little bit, where he's like outsmarting the cops. He doesn't kill any of them; he just maims them.
Non-lethally subdues.
Yeah, Rambo's old colonel shows up and is like, "You can't do it this way. You gotta, he's the greatest soldier who ever lived. You're being foolish." And then at the end of the movie, Rambo fucks up the whole town, starts war on the town, only to be surrounded by cops where he decides not to kill Brian Denner, his character, even though he's given the opportunity. And then his colonel, his captain, is like, "What's going on?" And Rambo essentially gives a very impassioned monologue, which I'm sure resonated with a lot of people in 1982. That's basically like, we were sent to fight in a war that wasn't ours, and we came home, and no one wants us anymore, and no one's nice to us, and what was it for? Yeah, is that what the speech is
war?
about?
What is it good for? Yeah. What do you think of the movie?
I thought that it was okay. I think that the action is pretty good in some parts, but it's also the kind of movie, and I could not say the same about its sequels, it's the kind of movie that feels like it's trying to be like, this is all bad stuff. Like, the fact that he's this good at killing is a bad thing. It's a result of him being bastardized by the nation, And I felt like there was a more tasteful lack of emphasis on the action in the first film.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it's kind of saying that it's a bad thing. And I don't know when we'll probably get into this. Maybe it'll be peppered throughout the whole episode. I pretty strongly politically disagree with the message of the film, and I think I probably would pretty strongly disagree with what Sylvester Stallone believes, which is evidenced and only loses more and more nuance and wiggle room as the sequels go on. I thought, but here's the nice thing I can say about the first Rambo. It is a valid perspective. It's like, I understand that this is how a lot of people felt, and so while I think it is an unfinished perspective, or maybe a perspective that only sees one side of a complex argument, I think this movie has its place in representing that perspective, because
So you're more of the side of you shouldn't have got drafted if you didn't want to fight in the war.
No, I'm more of the side of America is very, these days it's not a hard pill to swallow. Most people would agree that America was the bad guy in the Vietnam War, and I think that the larger truth that the first one ignores and the sequels outright reject absurdly is that yes, it's wrong to shit on war vets and not reject them from their own country, but this movie does not, even though it acknowledges a mistrust of government. It's like this Republican mistrust of government, where it doesn't go, the bigger problem is there shouldn't have been a war. It goes, why don't you love us anymore, we fought for you, and it doesn't really acknowledge the larger truth of that, which only gets made worse and worse throughout each film, and seemingly less understanding is given.
Yeah, I think it is in the first film. There is a rejection of the war itself as well, and it's been in Rambo's final sort of monologue and his final thoughts. It is very I was forced to do this by you, and now you're telling me I'm a horrible person for doing it.
Yeah.
which I think is,
I think it's valid as well, but it's also like, I wanted to do this because I love America, and therein lies probably the part I disagree with, is that you shouldn't love love America.
I think that getting drafted into a war is like different from I think there was a lot of reluctant soldiers in Vietnam, especially.
Oh, for sure, and I don't think this movie ignores it. It's maybe it's more that it's evidenced by its sequels that the perspective of Vietnam is maybe not as critical of America as it probably should be.
But yeah, that monologue at the end is very powerful, obviously. I do just want to point out, there's my next door neighbours are having a deck being built as we speak. They started at like 7 a.m. this morning. It's now just after 6 p.m. The deck does not look entirely finished, so I'm not sure how long they'll continue. But if you hear the faint pitter-patter of a nail gun in the background, just imagine we're recording this, in a war zone. Just, really method podcasting for Rambo. But yeah, I did write down the monologue from the end of the film. So it starts off when Trotman, his old colonel, says, "You did everything to make this private war happen. You've done enough damage. The mission is over, Rambo. Do you understand me? The mission is over. Look at them out there. Look at them. If you won't end this now, they will kill you. Is that what you want? It's over, Johnny. It's over." And Rambo says, yeah, I'm actually going to deliver the monologue.
Powerful.
I just wanted to set up that joke.
Very good, Richard. What a great joke that ended up being. Wow.
It's good. Yeah, I quite liked the movie overall. I think that it's
so like, I can imagine like a Vietnam vet listening to this and being like red in the face hearing my perspective, and then you go and do that. It's somehow so much more disrespectful to be like, this impassioned speech, which I'm sure was meant a lot to a lot of people. It basically sounded a little something like this.
Do you want to hear the monologue?
Okay.
All right. So he goes. Okay. So he goes.
Wow!
It's got him twice. It's nothing is over. Nothing. You don't just turn it off. It wasn't my war. You asked me. I didn't ask you. And I did what I had to do to win. But somebody wouldn't let us win, and I come back to the world and I see all those maggots at the airport protesting me, spitting, calling me baby, killing all kinds of crap. Who are they to protest me, huh? Who are they? Unless they've been there and they've been me and been there and know what the hell they're yelling about. And he says, it was a bad time for everyone, Rambo. It's all in the past now. For you, for me, civilian life is nothing. In the field, we had a code of honor. You watch my back, I watch yours. Back here, there's nothing. You're the last of an elite group. Don't end it like this. And then this is my favorite line. And the thing he says, back there I could fly a gunship. I could drive a tank. I was in charge of $1 million equipment. Back here I can't even hold a job parking cars. And like, to me, because it's one of these things that you could see that as like a fuck yeah, like war was the place to be. But it's like, it's more like, I see it as like, it's quite a sad line that it's like these young men who have no real, applicable real life skills were like had to be put in charge of these things. And it's like, it's more about like the sort of idiocy of war that it's like, you're these are $1 million equipments, and it's but
I hope I've been clear in my perspective that I'm not saying that like, oh, get over it, you Republican baby. Like,
I mean, you did say, oh, he fucking goes crazy when it's like his severe PTSD from being tortured as a POW.
That was just me being a terrible person, not a terrible political person. I think this is something I think is true for this, though, and it's something it's a sentence you won't hear me say a lot, especially discussing politics. Is I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. Is that like, no, of course they shouldn't have. They shouldn't have been protested because they were the tools. They were the pawns. So I think Rambo, First Blood, the movie says respect the troops, but it doesn't say because they were in executing a larger plan that we all agree was wrong. It doesn't quite condemn that part of it. It's like that BoJack episode, where he gets in trouble for not saying
the second one.
Yeah, for saying he doesn't want to respect the troops.
Because he stole muffins from Neil McBeal, the Navy SEAL. So interesting thing about this. The book that's based on Rambo is actually like a bloodthirsty killer.
Oh God! I wondered which way the book was going to lean.
Yeah, and so he absolutely does not he just straight up slaughters all of these people, and then dies at the end of the book.
Right.
And so there's no sequels to the book. But there was the book came out in 1972 when the Vietnam War was still going on, and the rights to it were bought in 1972 and then sort of just thrown around Hollywood. There was lots of scripts floating around, all this kind of stuff. Then when the film was finally made, the first cut of it was famously almost 3.5 hours long. And Stallone and Stallone and the producer or his agent or whoever hated the film so much. They said it made them sick. And so Stallone actually tried to buy the rights to the film so that he could destroy it, believing it to be a career killer. But after pleading with the producers to remove most of his role in the film, they cut it down and film history was made, as they say. But this is a lot of places kind of talk about Rambo being the first action hero, and it isn't that the first. I mean. Surely that can't be right, but I haven't done enough research on it.
Well, it's not even that. It's also the idea of referring to him as an action hero feels like it's
not in this film, but
with the right. Oh, yeah. Well, there you go. Yeah,
it's interesting this film because you know how a decade is a 10-year period, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, but but the kind of what comes to be defined as that type of movie. Or music or whatever is usually a couple of years late. So it's if you think about the music that really represented the 90s or whatever, or you talk about like grunge or pop towards the later half, they kind of came up in 92, 93 sort of thing. First Blood to me kind of feels like the turning point from a 70s film to 80s film. It came out in 1982. And it's there's a very 70s feel about this film that it's this would stand next to something like Taxi Driver or
The Godfather.
Everyone knows films from the 70s. I don't need to list them, but it's that more sort of these ideas, especially to do with the Vietnam War, and just sort of a drifter, a lonely man trying to find his place in the world. A lot of those are very more sort of 70s ideals, and closer to Rocky than Rocky 4, but then First Blood kind of is that turning point because it's this character who really should have existed in the 70s, but instead existed in the 80s. And so instead of, carrying over these ideals of the war and all this, they just go, that guy was cool when he did action. And then by the time we get to Rambo 2, only 3 years later, in 1985, which is, very 80s.
We're in the thick of it.
Yeah, he's now just a greased up action hero.
Well, because I think what you're saying is a really, really great observation, because a lot of kind of film history people believe that what you're talking about, this turning point you're talking about, is probably Star Wars, where we go from these, thought experiment kind of think piece movies like The Godfather and Taxi Driver, and now we have the blockbuster, which one day used to mean Taxi Driver, now means Iron Man. The Star Wars in 1977 turned the tide from thought-provoking to spectacle. But
also people say that about Jaws as well, which was 2 years earlier.
True. What you say about Rambo and First Blood is so true, because this would have existed before Star Wars, this in whatever capacity.
Well, yeah, because the book was 72.
There you go. And so it's no wonder why it's a very pretty serious movie followed by some very silly sequels. Is because it lived and somewhat pioneered through that transition. From thought-provoking character pieces.
Yeah, well, maybe it's like one of these songs that took so long to get made that it was brought to life in that pre-Star Wars era, pre-Jaws era even. And then when it finally saw the light of day at the early 80s, when people were looking for a greased-up action hero, and they said, well, we've got this dude,
It feels inappropriate to make him one, but this is all we've got. Yeah.
But,
who did direct this?
Oh, yeah, Ted Kotcheff.
Mm-hmm.
And written by Stallone, or he did rewrites based on an earlier script. What do you think has a Rotten Tomatoes?
82.
85. Very good.
It was arbitrary, I guess, because it came out in 1982.
One interesting thing about this film, though, is this was the first Hollywood blockbuster released in China.
Oh, yeah. Well, that certainly started its own legacy as well.
Yeah. And up until 2018, this was the largest number of tickets sold for a foreign film in China, when I think it was overtaken by Infinity War. Yeah.
That's so odd.
Yeah. Strange, eh? Do you have anything else that you want to say about Rambo, about First Blood? Sorry,
it's actually called First Blood. Rambo's a separate film.
It has been very fun. I'm glad the fourth film was called Rambo, because you ask people if they've seen Rambo, and they go, "Don't you mean First Blood?" And they go, "No, I mean the 2008 film."
Although it does have an alternate title, depending.
Yeah. Do you have any final thoughts before we move on to a new segment?
Well, I maybe did, but now I'm too enticed by a new segment to fully register with my brain if I do have any new thoughts.
So this welcome along to the new segment. Theme song pending. Carlisle, thank you. I had an idea this week that, especially watching First Blood, really kicked it off. That and knowing what the sequels were going to become, I had this sort of idea, and this is something that I wish we'd done from day one.
Should have started the podcast.
Yeah, this is what the podcast should be called. And so the idea of this segment is that it's like, what you watch your first film, so it'll be the end of our discussions about first films in the franchise, and the question is, why is this a franchise? And because I think that there's a moment in every first film that tells you why they made a sequel, or like why they spawned into it. And so sometimes that might be something like Nightmare on Elm Street. It's like, you've made too iconic of a killer. You can't just let him be in one film. Sometimes it's blatantly set up for a sequel. There's unanswered questions or whatever.
Lord of the Rings planned as a
exactly. And sometimes it's what once films start to take on a life of their own after they're released. And so with not being able to think of a better name, but you and I both independently came out with this name. This segment is called French Wise.
We're going with it, aren't we?
We are going with it. I mean, unless you can think of a better title on the spot now.
Yeah, no, I can't.
I pitched it to AJ, and then we both at the same time message each other, because I said it'd be like the Y of the franchise or something like that, and then we both said French Wise. Yeah, I mean, if you've got a better idea for the segment title, please leave it in the comments.
And to clarify, it's WHYS, French Wise. We're not saying, like, listen to this and you'll become French Wise.
Yeah.
But you will also become that.
It's a dual meaning, which is fun. So, because the First Blood is an interesting one, because obviously knowing what we know about the art of the franchise, we're a couple of French wise buddies. That we know, you make a film like this, you create a character like Rambo, we're going to see him again. But what do you think is the idea I had for the sequel was, what's the franchise moment? Like what's the moment that you're a film producer in 1982, you watch this film and you think, we have to make another one of these?
Well, I mean, if this was truly the first action star, that sort of speaks for itself, I think. And like this was after Rocky, yeah?
It was, a few years after.
Right, and we're in the middle of the Rocky franchise?
So this was around the same time as Rocky 3. Rocky 4 came out in the same year as Rambo 2.
Right, okay. So I think that might be part of it, is that you've got this other thing. The idea of a franchise is developing. We talked about on the Rocky episode how, like, people were like, Rocky 5? What's he gonna do next? Fight aliens? Like, how ridiculous it was to continue making Rocky movies at that point in history. So, I mean, the idea of a franchise was new. Stallone was hot.
Yeah.
His other iconic character is doing well, so I think maybe that was part of it. Was like, it worked for Rocky, maybe it'll work for Rambo, but then you've got to sequelize what I would argue is quite an unsequelable idea. And you said that he dies in the book. Boy, does that sound like a better ending to that story.
Well, but also him being bloodthirsty in the book is interesting, and I kind of think the French wise is like taking another look at the book and being like, what's this character actually supposed to be like? And because the sequels kind of seem to be more in line with what he's like in the book. And so it almost seems like the French wise is ignoring the first film, ignoring the fact that he dies, and making sequels to the book.
It's like the dying visions he's having as he's shot to death by the sheriff. Yeah, interesting. Okay,
but because I'm not even sure that I guess because he has an iconic look as well with the headscarf, that it is like you've got a guy that looks great on a movie poster, like straight up,
absolutely.
like that's part of it. Yeah.
Oh, he's a fucking tank as well. Like, you see, so I hadn't seen any of the Rambo movies before, but I've seen it parodied in dozens and dozens of things to once again bring up Weird Al's UHF for the second time in a row, because we talked about it on the Bill and Ted episode. Like, my biggest exposure to Rambo is a scene in UHF where he dresses up like Rambo in like what really isn't that much of a parody of a muscle suit, but I thought was, and puts on a red headband, which is more of a parody of the second film than the first, and like shoots arrows everywhere and the arrows explode on contact, something which again isn't actually a parody. I thought it was. I thought the joke was like, because everything explodes, what if the arrows exploded on contact? But he's able to finagle that somehow in the throes of war.
All right, so that is the French wise explained.
Okay.
3 years later in 1985, we had Rambo First Blood Part 2, directed by George P. Cosmatos.
Oh, fun name.
Yeah.
Call the movie that.
Cosmatos. Cosmatos. Cosmatos.
Cosmatos! It sounds like a bad Jerry Seinfeld bit.
Yeah, he's talking about his toes. What's this one about?
Okay, so he's in prison because he got put in prison because he committed atrocities in this little town. And while he's chipping away at rocks, Colonel Troutman comes up again, turns up, and he's like, hey, we can get you a presidential pardon if you go to, I believe it's Thailand, and take photos or prove that there are American prisoners of war still there.
Yeah.
Basically. And Rambo replies with a line which I think perfectly encapsulates why whatever he understood about the first film clearly went over his own head, because it shows a clear lack of understanding. He says to Troutman, Colonel, do we get to win this time? Because America, of course, lost the Vietnam War.
Well, it depends who you ask.
That's true. And he's like, I hope so, or whatever. Anyway, so you've paid attention to the first 20 minutes. He goes to Thailand, and then it turns out, the Americans in charge actually betray him, and because
that's what Americans do.
Because they didn't want him to free the prisoners. They wanted him to prove they were there, but he frees them.
Just take pictures, yeah.
Yeah, he frees them and they refuse to help him. But he fights off a bunch of evil foreigners. This movie looks horrible. And then gets home and saves all the prisoners. And he gives another impassioned speech to Troutman where he says the line, "All I want is for this country to love us as much as we love it." Which again is a very politically charged message that I don't know. I think that the real problem here is like I can be swayed into like seeing, and I do see the first film as quite a valid perspective, whether I agree with it or not. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like I think this should lead the way to a larger conversation, but I think this is a very valid conversation. The second one is like that goes out the window, and you and I were messaging each other log lines of what each the first and second movie are, and I thought it was so funny because we were like, Rambo 1/First Blood is about like the cost of war extends beyond the battlefield. It's incalculable, and the people we sent over came back forever changed and carry with them a horrible, horrible burden. And Rambo 2 is like, let's commit some fucking war crimes, motherfucker! Like, he sets a bunch of people on fire in this. It's horrible. It's like, that's a war crime. You're not allowed, this is the Geneva Convention. You're not allowed to, like, set people on fire. And I think this franchise has aged very poorly. Maybe one of the most poorly aged franchises, at least of this magnitude, that we've ever covered. Yeah. That's not poorly aged because it's weird about consent. Like, this is poorly aged because you have a movie where
I was going to say it's like one of the only ones that doesn't use a slur, but they do.
Yeah, they do. This is poorly aged because you have an American soldier gunning down Thai soldiers, and like whether I'll get to that in a second, and it just looks really bad, and you're there rooting for America, exercising its iron fist over the countries that it still to this day oppresses. And like, this is the problem with the Rambo sequels, right? Is that it is not that these gangs in other countries don't exist. It's not that these atrocities don't happen. It's not that people aren't tortured. It's not that people aren't kept prisoner. It's that we are only shown how bad foreign soil is, and we're only told the everyday American, the war vet, is the good guy. Like, there is the most they go into criticizing America is like a very sort of vague, nebulous fat cat government kind of thing. Whereas like it's so uncomfortable to watch Rambo 2, I think, in 2022, and knowing what I know now about America, and I think, it's challenging. It's a challenging film. This whole franchise could be placed into problematic corner. I think.
Just like slow down the problematic corner theme song 1,000% and just have it playing under. Did you notice who is credited with writing this film?
It was James Cameron.
The very same James Cameron, Titanic, Avatar.
So it is. I didn't know if it was the same one.
Yeah, I was like, surely it's not. But, he says, according to Stallone, he wrote like James Cameron wrote like an early draft that was then heavily rewritten. It was written under the title First Blood 2, The Mission, which will feed into our titles discussion later on. But Rambo had a sidekick, a nerdy, funny sidekick, which was taken out. Stallone,
because these movies need to be very serious.
Stallone later recalled, "I think that James Cameron is a brilliant talent, but I thought the politics were important, such as a right-wing stance coming from Troutman and his nemesis Murdoch, contrasted by Rambo's obvious neutrality, which I believe is explained in Rambo's final speech. I realize his speech at the end may have caused millions of viewers." This is talking about the first film. I think, no. Yeah. I realize the speech at the end may have caused millions of viewers to burst veins in their eyeballs by rolling them excessively, but the sentiment stated was conveyed to me by many veterans. Also, in his original draft, it took nearly 30 to 40 pages to have any action initiated, and Rambo was partnered with a tiki sidekick. So it was more than just politics that were put into the script. There was also a simpler storyline. If James Cameron says anything more than that, then he realizes he's now doing the backstroke badly in a pool of lies.
Wow. Oh my god, the idea that Sylvester Stallone thinks that Rambo is a neutral character is so funny to me. That's so insane because, like, these movies clearly do not get it, right? Like, these sequels don't. Like, if the like, I don't think Rambo kills anyone in the first film. And
well,
like,
yeah,
that's,
so the first film famously has, the Rambo kills one person. It's by accident.
Right, there you go. So, we talked about this as well. We're saying, like, Rambo in the first one is like, I cannot bear with the fact that I have taken a life. And in these ones, it's not. It's
I cannot bear that I've gone 5 minutes without killing someone.
And it's like, I think if these movies were unpolitical, or as unpolitical as action movies about killing people in other countries can be, like, I think if that was the case, you could get away with, like, a lot of the stuff. But because it's so wrapped up in, like, very tumultuous ideas and ideals, I just don't think that it's appropriate to make a sequel. And if you are going to make a sequel, I don't think it's appropriate to have him running around gunning down locals.
This was nominated for a few awards. Best sound editing at the Oscars. And it also won a few Razzie Awards. Worst picture, worst actor, worst screenplay, worst original song for a song by Frank Stallone.
Oh my! Can we talk about the music that rolls in the credits of the first three movies? So funny. These like gaudy, overly cheesy, like, just not at all the type of music that I think can be played seriously anymore.
Yeah, I remember the third one has a cover of He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother.
Yeah, exactly. So imagine that kind of music playing at the end of these very, like, grotesque. So, like, you watch all these people get exploded and stuff, that's like, it's so silly.
Yeah. So, also, it's worth mentioning, similar to with Rocky episode, where Sylvester Stallone was asked by Jonathan Ross to rank the Rocky films. I'll give them scores out of 10. Apparently, on an episode of Graham Norton, he was asked the same thing about the Rambo films. He ranked First Blood first, said he wouldn't change a thing. He thinks it's perfect. He ranked Rambo First Blood Part 2 fourth, and he said it's like a cartoon.
So even he is understanding that he didn't really get it.
Yeah. So the
fascinating guy. The more I learn about Sylvester Stallone,
there's one interesting thing in this film, which I'm sure you picked up on, when he's floating down the river with his new potential love interest, and he says to her, "I am expendable."
Yes.
Which is our second franchise where Sylvester Stallone refers to himself as expendable, whether that be in the title of the film or in the text itself.
Sylvester Stallone, if we're doing some useless statistics right now, it is worth noting that at 18 films, Sylvester Stallone, I believe, is our most seen, like, most prolific actor from all the franchises we've watched that where it's actually like him on screen.
Appear in live action.
Yeah. Is it 18?
He's our most seen actor, but not necessarily our most watched actor.
Which is insane, isn't it? If you'd asked me who's the most seen actor in your franchises, I would have been like, I probably wouldn't have guessed Sylvester Stallone. But then I think about it and, like, he's the Rambo, Rocky, Expendables, Spy Kids. What else?
Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, and that's all of them.
That's all, but that's still, like,
just because he's been in two really long franchises plus an extra one for for good measure. Is he any other franchises that is he ever going to overtake Kelly Sheridan? He'd need another 9 films to tie. It's Suicide Squad, Men in Black, what else?
I could see us doing Men in Black. I don't know how we'd tackle Suicide Squad. It's like embarrassed of itself for being a franchise.
Escape Plan, I think, is one. He's going to be in Guardians 3, presumably. Yeah, he's not. Escape Plan 2. He's in the Ratchet and Clank movie. Did you know that? I
think I did know that.
Oh, crazy. Oh, he's in Get Carter.
Great.
No, wait. Is that? No, wait. I'm thinking of a different film. I think of Get Shorty. Yeah, maybe he'll never win. Sorry, bud. Unless he continues to do more films, which I'm sure he will. Also, so there was the Colonel Podolsky was originally cast with Dolph Lundgren was going to play him. And then Sylvester Stallone was like, wait a second, this is the same guy we've got to play Ivan Drago. And so they paid off his contract to release him from the film. So it actually got far enough before Stallone himself was like, well, he looked familiar.
This is the Russians that show up halfway through the film to grace the movie with a white villain so you can stop feeling as conflicted.
Yeah, he was going to be... because this came out the same year as Rocky IV as well. So that's First Blood Rambo Part.
What does it have
2?
on Roddy T's?
What would you guess?
42.
33. Yeah, Rambo 3. 3 years later, 1988, directed by Peter McDonald. But it wasn't always directed by Peter McDonald, but we'll get to that. What is this one about? What's the first 30 minutes of this one about?
The Troutman has been... I can skip the first 20 and just go from the 20-minute mark onward. Troutman has been kidnapped by some Russian invaders in Afghanistan. So this one is essentially Rocky... sorry, I beg your pardon. Rambo goes to Afghanistan to fight off like this invading Russian force where he aligns himself with a group of Afghan freedom fighters. What are they called? The Mujahideen. Mujahideen. And so they fight off these Russians in the desert. And in the one Rocky movie where he joins... in the one Rambo movie where he joins a group of people of colour to fight white villains, it just so happens that the Mujahideen would go on to become the Taliban in real life.
Well, it's a little more nuanced than that.
All good. That's all I understood of going into it.
Yeah, so it is, again, I've seen Charlie Wilson's War. That's almost my extent of knowledge of the Mujahideen. But from what so the Mujahideen refers to like a large group of groups. One of those groups went on to become the Taliban. There's a fan theory that the group is the one that Rambo gave weapons and trained.
Yeah,
actually, we should talk about this here. So there's a famous thing at the end of this film, which I actually was shocked to find out that I'd been had this week. So the film ends with an on-screen caption that says, "This film is dedicated to the gallant people of Afghanistan." And it's it was long circulating that it actually said this film was dedicated to the brave Mujahideen fighters of Afghanistan. And yeah, for so long I took this as fact. I thought, because I knew it was like a Snopes thing. It's like, does it actually end with a tribute to the Mujahideen? Since they're now associated with the Taliban. And yeah, it turns out the answer is no. I just always thought it was like, yep, no, Rambo 3, crazy, different world. And then I found out this week that it's actually the gallant people of Afghanistan. I didn't actually know any of the gallant people of Afghanistan, or that the urban legend was that they changed it after September 11 to the gallant people of Afghanistan.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
But I just always thought it was the Mujahideen thing. I didn't realize that there was talk that it had been changed or anything like that, or that it ever said gallant people of Afghanistan.
Oh wow! I thought it got changed. Yeah,
no, crazy. Yes, I'd always said that.
It's funny as well that you're saying, the Taliban are one of the sections of the Mujahideen, and how like maybe that absolves them a little. But look at Spotify right now. One of their sections is Joe Rogan peddling misinformation,
and they lost Neil Young.
Yeah, so my point being is like, you know, your brand is kind of sullied if one of your outcrops becomes the Taliban.
It is the funny thing about Neil Young is it's always nice to find out that like a very old celebrity is left wing.
Yeah, right.
Like
not finding that out with these movies, so it was a great relief. We can't have Sylvester Stallone, but we can have Neil Young.
Yeah, but no, it is funny. Like, yeah, I wouldn't have picked Neil Young to be like outraged at Joe Rogan, but hey, here we are talking about him. Stream Neil Young on Tidal and iTunes. Yeah, this film I hinted at before that it didn't always have that director. The original director, Russell Mulcahy, was fired. He he directed Highlander.
Oh wow!
And a few other things
of the ilk then of the time.
Yeah. And Highlander 2: The Quickening. So you know he's not perfect. Zing. Oh, he also directed Scorpion King 2: Rise of Warrior.
I was gonna say, why have I researched the director of Highlander 2 before?
So yeah, the DOP was fired as well. Several weeks into filming, apparently.
He refused to take the lens cap off the camera.
So Stallone said, the canvas of this movie is so large you have to constantly have to think 10 scenes ahead. You can't wing it. They didn't go into the Battle of Waterloo not knowing what the strategy would be. Well, this movie is kind of like cinematic warfare. We had a huge cast and crew, more than 250 people, and tough locations to deal with. Everyone and everything has to coordinate. And then in a 2008 Q&A, he said that there was a disagreement over casting, which led to him firing Russell Mulcahy, which said he went to Israel 2 weeks before me with the task of casting 24 vicious-looking Russian troops. These were supposed to be to make your blood run cold. When I arrived on set, what I saw was 24 blonde, blue-eyed pretty boys that resembled rejects from a surfing contest. Needless to say, Rambo was not afraid of little competition, but being attacked by third-rate male models could be an enemy that could overwhelm him. I explained my disappointment to Russell, and he totally disagreed. So I asked him and his chiffon army to move on.
I don't know. I kind of think that that's kind of compelling to have, you know, big tough pretty action hero Rambo versus some pretty boys. I mean, I can see why he wouldn't want that, but it certainly aligns with every wonderful thing I'm learning about Sylvester Stallone as a person. But yeah, I don't know. I think maybe I agree with the original director there.
Interesting. He was replaced by Peter MacDonald, who this was his first film. He was an experienced second unit director. But yeah, he went on to direct such things as The Never-Ending Story 3, the only Never-Ending Story movie I've seen, and an episode of The Young Indiana Jones Chronicles. Fun enough. He also did some second unit stuff on X-Men Origins Wolverine, a few of the Harry Potter movies, Guardians of the Galaxy. Oh, nice. So yeah, good for him. But one interesting thing where we have Stallone talking about the scale of this production. This was actually the most expensive film ever made at the time. Within a reported budget of between $58 and $63 million. If it was at the 58 end, it was possibly overtaken later that year by Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
Oh, right.
Yeah, which had like $58.6 million. So that's Roger Rabbit's confirmed budget, but Rambo 3's might have been higher than that. But we don't really know.
And how much did this get on Rotten Tomatoes for all that money spent on it?
What would you guess?
I'm thinking like low 30s.
Very high 30s, actually. 40.
Wow. That's the highest a 30 can be.
It was also for in terms of ranking, this Stallone put this third in his ranking, which spoils what he put second because there was only 4 at the time when he was asked. But I think it must have been while he was promoting Rambo 2008. And he was like, yeah, this is my second favorite one after the first one.
I think that this is better. I think this is worse than the second one, just in terms of...
Looking at people talking about the Rambo films, they talk about this one the same way they talk about Rocky IV. that it's like, oh, it's the worst one, but I fucking love it, you know?
Well, and
but
exactly.
I think Rocky IV is legitimately amazing. And
this is the one which has Rambo riding a horse while an explosion happens behind him, you know, in the desert. Like, this has got all your kind of thick and creamy action movie hero shots in it, to the point where it's kind of insufferable and not the type of filmmaking that I really resonate with personally. One line in this movie that was clearly meant to be like a kiss-off line, but it was one of those things where I found it kind of funny because it was just not true, was when Rambo's trying to save Troutman, and the Russian villain says to Troutman, like, who does he think he is, God? Who does he think he is, God? And Troutman goes, no, God would have mercy. Rambo doesn't, whatever. And it's like Rambo clearly shown to have mercy. It's a defining characteristic of him. It's what sets him apart from the other bloodthirsty, vicious, you know, is that, like, the climax of the first and second film are actually predicated on him showing mercy in front of Troutman.
and God, I think, wouldn't show mercy.
Yeah, totally. That's a great point. So I just thought that was funny because it's like supposed to be this cool line, but if you think about it, it's like, well, it's not entirely true, is it?
Do you have much else you want to say about Rambo 3?
I just think that these I'm not enjoying myself so far. Right. That's what I would like to say. I'm not enjoying myself so far. I thought the first one was all right. Didn't really like the second one. Didn't really like the third one. Sat down yesterday to watch the fourth one and fifth one nearly back to back, but not quite enough time to give myself time to reset.
I watched them mostly back to back. And that fourth one is just called Rambo. It came out 2008, so this was, you know, the 1-2 punch sequel of this. And this is what we talked about last week briefly, that films getting 2 distant sequels. Oh no, I think we spoke about it on our Scream episode on the Patreon. But yeah, that like enough time has passed since the distant sequel was invented that we're now getting 2 distant sequels. But Rocky had it as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so this came out a couple years after Rocky Balboa.
Yeah, it was greenlit and sold before Rocky Balboa, but then Rocky Balboa was sort of sped into production, so that ended up coming out first. But Rambo was the original,
right? And it's called John Rambo in some regions.
Yeah, the title card for it says John Rambo, but it's called John Rambo in certain regions because the first film was called Rambo in those regions.
I feel like it was called John Rambo here. I remember seeing posters for it, and it was called John Rambo. I remember in 2000.
I remember seeing the opposite.
Wow. This is directed by Sylvester Stallone as well. He got one.
It's this was his first non-Rocky movie he'd directed since Staying Alive.
Wow. My favourite Rocky movie, Staying Alive. I know that's not what you meant.
Yeah, that's obviously not what I said. Yeah. You fucking piece
and what are we talking Rotten Tomatoes here?
What would you guess?
I don't know. I have no idea. I know Stallone put this at
2.
So he put it second. And I actually tend to agree. I think this is the second best Rambo movie, but I wouldn't guess it's got anything more than maybe like 40% on Rotten
37.
Tomatoes. Yeah. All right. So it's years later. Rocky is nowhere in sight because this is a Rambo film. The two presumably don't know each other. And I believe where does this one take place?
Burma or Myanmar.
Okay, Myanmar.
Well, Burma's like it's also called Myanmar, but yeah.
Right. And so essentially the plot is, and I foolishly was distracted slightly for the first 20 minutes of this, but it's about like a group of missionaries approach local handyman John Rambo, who's shown to have a way with the river
ladies
and the snakes and the everything going on, and they ask him, "Can you get us into this area because?" Are they trying to save someone? What are they trying to do?
Yeah, they're missionaries. They're trying to provide medical aid to the Karens.
Right, and then they get he takes them so far before they get into some trouble, and they don't like that he killed a bunch of people, so they tell him to go home. And then they themselves are kidnapped, and Rambo, along with the help of a bunch of mercenaries, including Graham McTavish, amongst the cast, go to save everyone. And then at the end, after killing all of these people, Rambo goes back to Arizona to see his dad, who was mentioned once earlier in the film.
Well, we presumably always knew that he had a dad.
It's true. It's on me. You're right.
Yeah, well, so, maybe you don't know everything, AJ. So, yeah, this was apparently Stallone resisted returning for quite a long time.
I'd say it was about
but it was
20-something years, wasn't it?
20 years. But he didn't want to. He decided he said he was done with action movies for a while. But then he said for a long time there wasn't a story good enough to bring him back. But then he came up with the idea for a story where Rambo would travel down to Mexico to rescue a kidnapped girl. And then thought, actually, no, you know what? That doesn't feel very Rambo. So I'll do something else. And then did this, but it's not the last we've seen of that plot idea. And it's also not the last time Stallone would suggest that one of his iconic characters should travel south of the border.
True.
Yeah.
Because he said that about a
potential a new Rocky movie, yeah.
God, that's such a bad idea.
Well, now that we know what he thinks of Mexicans as well.
Well, I think that that Stallone continues to be an enigma here, because the Rocky movies, by and large, at the very least, we have conflicted feelings about some of the middle films, but they really stick the landing, especially with the distant sequels. I thought Rocky Balboa is probably my favorite Rocky film.
It's great.
Except for maybe Creed. And in that, it's like this clear understanding of like the toll that a character, carries and all this sort of thing. I thought this movie was pretty bad. This Rocky Rambo 2008 was pretty bad, and really didn't learn any of the lessons that the previous films were critiqued for. And in a way, it feels like this is, until the next film, this is Sylvester Stallone at his most brutal.
It's hyper violent, but it knows that it is.
And I want to say
it's
something
a little bit
about
Tarantino.
This.
It's definitely a little bit Michael Mann. It's
I want to say something about that, and that is
kind of a cosmic gumbo.
This is the nicest thing I can say about this movie. This is probably the most impressively violent movie I've ever seen. Yeah. People fall apart like tender cooked chicken breast when they get shot. And I've never seen anything like it before, and I wish it was in a movie that didn't have such a political ugliness hanging over it, because then I could enjoy it. But now it's like, I
remember when it came out, these stats of it being the bloodiest movie ever made and all this stuff.
I believe
466 deaths, an average of 2.59 deaths a minute.
Wow. I'd love to see another movie adopt this. I don't even know how to describe it. It's just it's like say like a convoy of guys get blown up, but everyone's in focus and they all blow up in different ways. Like someone's head will come off, someone's body will come apart, and it's just, you see everything. It's not bloody masses that explode into clouds of blood.
It's similar to Saving Private Ryan. Does a similar thing.
Yeah, sure, yeah. I just thought it was great. I thought that specific effect, whatever it is, however they did it, was so unique to this film. And I really like the final battle, which it consists of Rambo, all the good guys are at gunpoint about to be shot, and then Rambo single-handedly takes down everyone. In a movie that I was really not liking, I became entranced by this bloodthirsty scene because of how well it was directed. Maybe exactly, Stallone's really good,
Yeah, and apparently it was. There was a discussion about that we don't have much budget. Fake blood's cheap. Let's just make it gory as fuck. And apparently, Stallone was also didn't want to direct the film initially. There was another director attached, but he left for whatever reason. But the sort of the idea that convinced him was he thought, what if the film was directed by Rambo? What if the film had his personality? And that's kind of what you're talking about.
It is, but it's also, again, kind of like, right, yeah, Rambo from
we should see that
film?
before I praised her.
Well, no, I think it's, it's apolitical to say gory, hyper-violent films are cool. It's just when certain things have... I don't know, I thought this was better than any, like, Tarantino violence I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Better than any Rodriguez violence I've ever seen. Like, I just thought it was great.
It's interesting, it has the very... Stallone has a very unique way of lighting his films. That's like... Because Rocky Balboa... Well, I mean, or he did, in this sort of period, because Rocky Balboa has a very distinctive lighting and color grade, and this film has the same sort of one, which is interesting. That's sort of like the crushing the blacks and stuff. It's interesting about this film as well. So the writer of First Blood, David Morrill, because a lot of people, rejected this film. It received, mostly negative reviews, 37% on Rotten Tomatoes. Critics criticized the violence, the direction of the plot, and the political commentary. But yeah, the First Blood writer, David Morrill, said, I'm happy to report that overall I'm pleased. The level of violence might not be for everyone, but it has a serious intent. This is the first time that the tone of my novel, First Blood, has been used in any of the movies. It's spot on in terms of how I imagine the character, angry, burnt out, and filled with self-disgust because Rambo hates what he is and yet knows it's the only thing he does well. I think some elements could have been done better. I think this film deserves a solid 3 stars.
It's so funny, isn't it? That, like, again, the first Rambo film is like, killing is wrong. And, like, even the character takes that stance. And then there's literally a scene in this movie where one of the missionaries says to Rambo, killing is never okay. You should never kill. And then by the end of the movie, we see that very character club a guy to death. Presumably learning the moral of the film, which is sometimes killing is the right thing to do.
Well, I think the answer lies somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, it's like these movies struggle with being like kind of too stupid, too unaware of what they're implying, but then you hear the creators talk about it and it's like, well, you weren't completely going in blind. You knew there was like political undertones to it. None of these things, because like political undertones can be accidental. Someone can just make a film and tell a story and it contain their beliefs, but this isn't one of those cases. This is like clearly these writers and these directors and this actor clearly believe certain things about some very prickly topics, and they're gonna show it in maybe the most like bloodthirsty and unapproachable way. After watching this movie, I don't want to go up to Stallone and be like, hey, I think your political beliefs are wrong. He'd twist my head off its shoulders.
Bloodthirsty, more like blood-thirsty.
As in First Blood.
Yeah.
That's what it should be called.
Blood
it should be called Thirst Blood. First Blood, this is the first one. The second one, Thirst Blood.
That's good. I'm excited to have a timeless conversation.
I've been having people messaging me all week being like, I cannot wait. I cannot wait for you to discuss these titles.
So, I mean, without further ado, we'll, which, people love starting Wordle with. Yeah, do you? Because it's got, 4 vowels?
The letters.
Yeah.
Oh my God, what a great hack.
Yeah. It's got 4 vowels in it.
Wow, thank you. And
D's a fairly common one as well. Apparently, irate is one of the best ones to start with because it's I, A, and E are very common vowels. Well, they're vowels, by virtue of being a vowel, they are common. And then T and R are they're some of the most common consonants. There's another one that they reckon. I think it's an anagram of irate, but it's like. What is irate? Anagram. Is there another? No, it was something similar. I don't know. But it was like essentially it keeps the letters in the right position as well as being their frequency. Anyway, so
the word was could the other day.
I know.
And I guessed it with so little problem. It still took me like 4 out of 6, but like by 3, I was like CO, and then managed to guess it was good.
Nice. I one other hack I found for Wordle, because the only thing about Wordle is that you can't just like, if you know the 4th letter, you can't just type that in and then work around that. That if you just type X's, so CO space L space, and then you just put X's in, and your brain doesn't read an X as like the letter X as if you put anything else in there, and it allows you to sort of read it and put, which has helped me a lot, because like when it was
for
sugar.
Anyone listening, you're right, yeah. For anyone listening, I'm wondering why we're talking about this. We are approaching the hour mark where we usually stop recording, so I get the feeling we're both padding so we can stop recording.
I wasn't. I mean, I was. We've gotten through these films very quick.
That's true.
Probably much to the chagrin of some Rambo fans.
Some Rambo. It's like some rando.
So we're now at 2019. The film Rambo: Last Blood.
The last good year.
Yeah. Yeah. When our kids ask us what was it like before COVID, we'll say, well, Rambo: Last Blood had just come out. I think that should tell you everything you need to know.
And they'll go, what, it was worse? Rambo: Last Blood came out and was only up and up for humanity after that.
Yes, so 2019, directed by Adrian Grunberg. More like, yo, Adrian, make a better movie. 26% on Rotten Tomatoes. So it's the lowest rated of the Rambos.
Good. This movie sucks. I thought this was such a bad movie, and I can't wait to discuss it.
All right. Well, what's it about?
All right. So
and
what?
There is a big spoiler in here that we need to talk about. So if you haven't seen Rambo: Last Blood, and you think, it's a Rambo movie, I don't care about spoilers. There's one that's like kind of
genuinely surprising,
more important than like the rest of like any other plot beat in any of the other Rambo movies.
Yeah. So I'm interested to hear how early he came up with the plot for this movie, as you told us before when we talked about Rambo 2008. Because what this movie feels like, it feels like Sylvester Stallone heard Donald Trump's campaign speech in 2015, where he talked about Mexicans being rapists, and he went, "Hey, I got an idea for a movie." That's what this movie is. This movie is the Republican wet dream of the
idea of Mexico,
idea of Mexico.
And it's funny, like the idea, like that Stallone so badly wants to send all his characters south of the border, and we now know that it's like because there are no people down there,
So this movie is about in a shocking display of continuity that we also saw carrying over from Rocky Balboa to Creed. And we see it carrying over from...
He still has a restaurant in Rambo: Last Blood.
Rocky 2008 to Last Blood is that he now lives in his father's old house. Rambo, sorry. He now lives in his father's old house, which is only ever seen or mentioned at the end of Rambo 2008. And I just think it's interesting that both this and the carryover to Creed from Rocky Balboa are examples where you could so see like a director coming aboard and being like, people aren't gonna know that you had a restaurant in the last movie, and he's like, no, it's continuity, you gotta do it, man. So there you go, there's a nice thing that I've said about this movie. So he lives on this ranch with this like housekeeper and a little girl, an 18-year-old girl, 18-year-old girl, who is referred to as his niece. I'm not sure how she's his niece. Is that ever explained?
So his friend Maria, and it's Gabriella's her granddaughter.
Okay. Well, she calls him Uncle John.
Yeah.
Which, call the movie Uncle John, because it sure as hell ain't Rambo. She's like, I want to see my dad. He lives in Mexico. I need to know why. She's found her
biological father.
Yeah, I need to know why he left me. And Rambo's like, don't do it. He's a bad man. And let me just say already, the tone, alien from the other Rambo movies by this point. Like, by the 10-minute mark, I should be seeing him jacked up, firing guns, firing missiles. This is such a slow start to a Rambo.
Although, actually, interestingly, you mentioned the first 10 minutes, because there is an extra 10 minutes at the start, which isn't in the United States version of this film. So the scene that starts in the rainstorm where he's rescuing these hikers and one of them's dead. He's like, "Don't go back for her." Yeah, that's not in. It's in Australia, Mexico, Sweden, Brazil, Finland, Germany, and Japan,
and New Zealand.
Yeah, we're Australia essentially.
Right? Why was it not an American?
The test audiences didn't like it.
Wow. Well, anyway, so this girl's like, I'm going to go anyway. She goes. Within a day of stepping foot in Mexico, let this be a lesson to you, young American woman thinking of maybe going for a trip down to Mexico.
We're going to say a lot of sarcastic comments about Mexico that we don't believe, but it's the only way to talk about this film.
Yeah. Within a day, she is sold into the Mexican sex slavery industry. But not like she does meet her dad, but that's barely a plot point.
Well, he says like, "Yeah, I left you because I fucking hate you and I fucking hate your mum." Yeah.
And so Rambo, they work out something's going wrong. So Rambo heads on down to old Mexico to check out what's going on. He ends up asking the right questions. He gets cut up by the bad guys. They like find him and like massacre his face. They fuck him up. And then he finally finds Gabriella.
Yeah, well, because they say like, "Oh, well, she's just some random, item to us, but now we know that you like her. We're gonna fucking put her through hell." And you go, "Damn, like Rambo's gonna get there just in the nick of time."
Yeah, and he gets there and he hammers everyone in the head with a hammer, and he takes the girl, and he hammers a guy in the nuts at one point.
Yeah.
He takes the girl and he's driving back to America, and in a shocking display, and something that I just think is the most insane narrative mistake. Yeah. She dies. She dies of her. She's been injected with drugs.
Yeah, she's been repeatedly raped over and over again and injected with heroin dozens of times, and then fucking dies on the drive back to Arizona.
And the last half of the movie is Rambo
Skyfalls them.
Yeah, or Home Alone's them.
Yeah. I get that reference.
It's like this movie is Taken, the movie Taken, and then it quickly switches to Home Alone in the last half, where he lures the bad guys back to good old Arizona, where they follow him into this underground tunnel system he's made, where he brutally kills them. In
similar hyperviolence. And
yeah, I think it's better in Rambo 2008.
Yeah, sure. But it's this has a similar like resourcefulness to the first Rambo, though I will give it that. That it's like setting traps and everything.
Well, and the nicest thing, and sorry, it ends with him ripping the heart out of the bad guy's chest, and then he sits in a rocking chair where it kind of implies he passes away. But the nicest thing I could probably say about this movie is that it called into light the thing wrong with the sequels until this one, which is like, it feels like the whole point of the first one is like, what if a Vietnam soldier was put into the American backyard? What then? And then all the sequels are like, what if a Vietnam soldier was put into a war? It's like, the same thing would happen. Like, and this brings it back to the backyard, which I
literally
think
his backyard.
Which I think is what they probably all should have been, to be honest. Like, taking place in America. I think that's what's alluring about them. But yeah, the girl dies, and like, I was just like, he saves her, and I was like, this movie's still got like half its runtime to go. What the hell's going to happen? And then she dies, and it was just, it's what I hated about it And it's because it's very easy. This is one of the, we've talked about this before, where you could very see a defender of this movie being like, "Well, you just can't handle the brave narrative decisions." The like it's so interesting that the MacGuffin, the whole point, the heart and soul of the movie dies. But I think what is ugly about it here is that it's the home run on this Trumpian political anti-Mexican bent, where it's like
nobody comes back from Mexico.
Nobody comes back. Even Rambo, the cartoon character, platonic ideal of an American action hero, even he cannot save someone if they go to Mexico for 12 hours. You know, like it is, to me, it felt like another political message in the film that I disagreed with. That was like, like, it's not, you cannot save them, they will die, you know. And I thought that was gross, and I thought this was a terrible movie.
Yeah, it's I will admit that I kind of the like the Home Alone stuff at the end.
But that's Rambo, right? That's action movies.
Yeah.
So that's, of course I've got dopamine receptors.
Yeah, of him ripping someone's heart out.
Yeah, of course. But it's like, that's all I can say about that. That's a nice thing.
Yeah, sure.
It's like, yep, it's filmmaking. Well done.
Yeah.
you did the thing.
Yeah, as for David Morrill as well, who wrote the book, he tweeted that he hated the film after it was released. He said, "The film was a mess, embarrassed to have my name associated with it." He originally started working on ideas for the film with Sylvester Stallone by phone early in pre-production, but Stallone eventually broke off communication and wrote the script with another writer, ignoring his ideas.
Well, so here's another thing as well, is like, by this point in his life, I kind of just want John Rambo to either be dead or happy, right? Like, he's you know, whether or not you like him or not, it's like, it's such a life lived already by this point. And then in the twilight years of his life, probably his late 60s, I'm imagining Rambo is by this point, the worst thing happens to him. Like, and it's so inescapably depressing, and it ends with him delivering this monologue about like how all he's ever known is war. And it's like, is this supposed to be a happy ending? Because this is not a happy ending. This is relentlessly sad. In fact, I also thought as he was dying in the rocking chair, I was like, if you'd just gone with her to Mexico, like, you know, in this fictional evil underworld.
Well,
it's
too scary for Rambo.
Well, yeah, there you go. Like, it's so weird that, like,
he also
like,
doesn't wear his head bandana thing,
and he doesn't have a mullet. That's what the character looks like. Sorry, Stallone, you did it for Rambo 2008.
He doesn't have a cowboy hat.
Yeah, just horrible. Just a relentlessly terrible movie.
One other thing this film, it's obviously as well inspired by Logan. I'd say that's fair to say.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
That kind of, you know, there's a lot of talk of like, they're now like, give XYZ character a Logan style send off. And this is the only other character that's actually done it. Like an R-rated, true to its roots in terms of violence, and language and everything. And, you know, he wears a cowboy hat. But it is funny because I've spoken at length about the incredible trailer for Logan that had Johnny Cash's Hurt in it. This tried to do a similar thing, and I remember watch the trailer for this when it first came out, and it has Old Town Road in it. So it's like, it's Rambo like suiting up at the ranch, and then it's like, yeah, I'm gonna take my horse to the Old Town Road. I'm gonna ride till I can't know. It's so weird. It's such a strange choice.
The tone of Rambo, like, they're not westerns. They're not like, so weird, man.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Because I
feel gross having watched this.
Yeah, it is. It's an odd film.
And what's great is that it would have pissed off everyone. It would have pissed off like left-wing cucks like us, and it would have pissed off the people that love Rambo movies because it's so spectacularly bad at being a Rambo movie until the last like 10 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, it's universally hated. But
then also the fact that she dies is like, again, sorry to keep just starting to just swirl into madness discussing this film, but it's like it's so obviously narratively like unsatisfying.
Yeah.
In a way that's like, I don't need this to be a subversive, like
Yeah.
I don't need Rambo 5 to subvert the like rescue narrative.
Even the fact that that they, I like, cause I mean the idea of him going to Mexico to rescue someone, but it's like, you should rescue her before anything really bad happens to her. Like, I'm sorry, I don't want to see that happen to this girl that I like. Like that for me, that was the thing that I was like, what the fuck? She actually becomes a sex slave. Because you see her like lined up with all the girls, and a couple of them get taken away, and they're like, "Oh, Rambo's going to burst in just before they get to her." And then it's like, nah, like, and he says like, "We're gonna like, now that we know she's yours, like, we're gonna fuck her up." And I was like,
it's his
now
fucking
Rambo,
fault.
yeah.
It's his fault. He did it. It's his fault. Like, obviously these are evil people, but like,
I think the truth lies somewhere in the middle.
He is given ample opportunity to like act different, and it's just. Do you know this? The problem is just that this film is miserable. It's a miserable end to a character who has lived a miserable life, and it's like the movie isn't quite aware of how truly miserable that is.
Yeah.
Because like. You know what's cooler than saying revenge is a good thing?
What?
Is saying the revenge won't set you free. You know, like I always felt like that was a much more mature thing. And like you see it in certain movies, like The Revenant's a great example off the top of my head, where like it turns out revenge isn't actually something that will set you free. And this movie seems to doesn't get as far as to realize that, because he rips a man's heart from his chest with his bare hands, and then is like, and now I've saved the day. And also, sorry, you go.
I was also interested as well that like, because Rambo is resourceful, he's intelligent, and then in this film he just wanders into Mexico, and then they're like, "Hey, old man," and he just gets the shit fucking beaten out of him. But because he also like he tosses his meds on the ground at one point, and then gets defeated. So it's not cool that you did that. That it's like, if he did that, and then it's like, yeah, fuck you. John Rambo doesn't need to be held back. It's like, no, but if you'd taken your meds, dude, you might have been all right.
I think to draw the obvious comparison to Rocky here, as well as like in terms of characters, how much cooler is Rocky Balboa than John Rambo?
Rocky Balboa's an all-time great protagonist, I think.
Like, and it's not even close. And it's crazy to me that it feels like Stallone has the same reverence like shared across both of them. When Rocky, I think, is like intensely. Like has so much more depth, so much more love and heart and soul and substance, and I thought this is not like it's obviously not one of the worst franchises we've ever watched in terms of like
because they're movies.
Filmmaking, in terms of like filmmaking capability, and like they're competently made, but in terms of like just stressfully bad movies, I thought by the end. Just a real sink. And I think as well, like, a lot of them exploit, especially Rambo 2008, it like exploits real life stuff to like push forward a point in your stupid, politically disgusting movie.
Yeah, well, the Burmese conflict was chosen deliberately because it was like one of the worst things happening in the world at the time, but wasn't being covered by the media. So he did that to shine a light on it.
Right, and it opens with a bunch of clips from
like actual news footage,
from the war, and then there's a scene, and this is the second to last movie we're talking about now. There's like a scene where this village gets attacked, and you see like up close shots of children being shot, of women being raped, and it's just like, do not fucking use this in your right-wing war movie. Like, it's so disgusting. It's so abhorrent, I think, to be doing this sort of... The violence looked pretty fucking cool, though, didn't it, AJ, from 20 minutes ago?
Yeah. Although the violence, like, despite being cool, it serves more of a plot reason in the fourth one, that it's like, this is the horrors of war, this is a real thing that's happened, whereas Last Blood is like, wouldn't it be cool if you killed a bunch of Mexicans?
Sure, but to use the horrors of war to further your pro-war stance, I think is pretty disgusting.
So that's Rambo Last Blood.
So fuck you, Sylvester Stallone.
One piece of dumb IMDb trivia segment we've been missing from this episode. I do have a fun one for this one. I didn't really research for the other ones. Nothing really jumped out enough at me. But yeah. So the opening scene that's cut in the US, he turns on the radio and 5 to 1 by the Doors is playing, which comes up later on. So it's weird that you take off the setup of this, like you pay off. Right. But the Dime IMDb trivia states, it would make perfect sense for John Rambo to select 5 to 1 by the Doors as preferred listening music. John Rambo is a veteran of the Vietnam War. The Doors were preferred listening music for US soldiers in Vietnam, so much so that Oliver Stone, a Vietnam veteran himself, was compelled to make the very well-known movie on the albeit brief history of the band.
Very dumb.
Very well-known movie. So that's the Rambo movies. We've got a segment where we like to talk about titles on this podcast. Or we talk about titles a lot on this podcast. But before we get to that, just to further blue ball the audience,
whet the appetites.
I
blue ball them.
I do have there's another segment called We Talk About Taglines Now that we do sometimes.
Okay.
So I just the fun taglines for these movies. So the first one was "This time he's fighting for his life," which feels like it's like a reference to Rocky, but like it's like Stallone because Stallone's name is above the tagline.
Is this for First Blood?
For First Blood, yeah.
It says "and this time."
Oh, this time. There's no "and."
Right.
But it's like, yeah, when they say this time he's fighting for his life, it's like we've just met this character, and so it feels like that. It's like a little meta sort of hint at Rocky, but.
Yeah.
The second one, this is the one that inspired me to write down the taglines for all the films. So the tagline of the poster is, "They sent him on a mission and set him up to fail, but they made one mistake. They forgot they were dealing with Rambo." Number 3 uses the line, "God would have mercy, John Rambo won't." And then it also...
Yes, he will.
It also does... the first was for himself. The second was for his country. This time, it's to save his friend, which isn't as badass as the other two.
No.
Fourth one, I actually quite like. Heroes never die; they just reload.
Very cool.
And the fifth one, the legend comes home. It's not what the film's about. And also, they drew first blood, he will draw last. Because also, we didn't mention this, but the title of the first film refers to a line where Rambo's talking about, they drew first blood.
Well, it's also a concept. It's not,
But it's directly lifted from the movie. There's a title bomb in the movie. But yeah, we talk about titles a lot on this podcast. Now, before you get into your thoughts, AJ, I do have one fun little story, and I have a handful of fun little AJ stories from before we started the podcast and sort of rekindled our friendship.
Oh Lord!
Almost all of these you refute. But they all happened. So you and I were making a...
Why can't you remember like good stuff I did before the podcast?
You didn't do anything.
It's always like critical of me.
If there were any...
Hey, if the shoe fits.
Okay, so setting the scene, it's 2013. You have written a short film that your friend Connor is directing. It's called Heavy. I've been cast as the lead. And so the plot of the what's the plot of Heavy? It's me.
Oh, come on!
It's me and my younger brother get taken on a hunting trip with our father. And, we're not big fans of hunting. Well, I'm not especially. And then the dad ends up getting hurt, and we have to sort of take him to safety. There's a moment in the film where I've snuck alcohol with me, and I'm sitting there, swigging it dramatically, and my brother comes up to me. He's holding the gun. He says something to me, and the line in the script is, "Oh, so you want to be Rambo too?" And I went up to you, and we were on set, and I went up to you, AJ, and I said, "I've noticed this. Shouldn't the line be, 'Oh, so you want to be Rambo First Blood Part 2? And you said, and walked away. And do you know what I thought, this guy doesn't care about titles. I
I probably didn't know it was called that.
Yeah, I was like, oh, okay, he obviously doesn't, he's not really into titles.
Mustn't be a title guy.
Yeah, and so I thought, okay, well, that'll be the last time I ever discuss titles with AJ. But it's a fun story, and we might get another fun pre-podcast AJ story next week, depending on what wins.
All right. So, here are my thoughts on the Rambo titles. Firstly, they're all called the wrong thing. They're all, regardless of if they're good or bad titles, every title, I think, in this series is misplaced for various reasons. So, I'll start at the end.
Ooh.
And then just randomly pick whatever one I want to
I do have
about.
some, because there were alternate titles and stuff like that. There's almost every film was at some point called Rambo number semicolon. So there was Savage Hunt. There was the mission for the second one. And obviously John Rambo for the fourth one.
Yeah.
Which also at one point was announced to be Rambo to Hell and Back, and then got negative feedback online, and they titled it back to Rambo. They didn't go with they didn't go with John Rambo because they thought that made it sound like it was the last one, like Rocky Balboa, and they said, we might do more Rambos, but we're never going to do Rocky again.
Yeah, whereas just calling it Rambo doesn't make it sound like the last one. So Rambo Last Blood, I think, is the best idea executed out of the in terms of titles. It's the only one that's it's what it represents is what they should have all been structured like, basically. But it's not, that's not the reality, and so therefore it's out of place. The first film, First Blood, is a cool title, but I'm just, with the ability of retrospect, it's you need to call this Rambo First Blood.
Yeah, it is similar to Indiana Jones, Rise of the Lost Ark. It's you can find it called Rambo.
On Letterboxd, these are called Rambo First Blood Part 2, Rambo First Blood Part 3, which I thought was interesting. But then you've got Rambo First Blood Part 2, which I think, despite not laughing at your joke 10 years ago, is a hilarious title, unintentionally.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's why I said it.
No, it's not. You said it because of the way it was written in the script. I thought it'd be funny. I thought, you know what? If I thought I'm going to take a risk here. This guy seems like he cares about titles as much as I do. Branch.
And my God, did you reject that olive branch?
So, first of all, it's so funny to call something two when the word first is also that's just hilarious already. But then also the idea of doing it's called Rambo First Blood Part 2 and not calling it Rambo 2 you know what I mean?
Second Blood.
How often do you see the subtitle gets the 2? Oh, it's very rare that you see that. But these movies should have been Rambo Prisoners of War or so, you know what I mean? Rambo First Blood, Rambo Prisoners of War, Rambo in the desert,
the brave Mujahideen.
The brave Mujahideen, something like that. And then I wouldn't have called the fourth one Rambo or John Rambo. I would have given it another subtitle. And then you got Last Blood, and that works. Well, yeah, sure. They don't need to be great titles. It's just there's a clear... it's annoying with franchises like this where you can see them wishing they'd called something else and it fucking up the snowball of the rest of the titles until you get to Rambo Last Blood, where it's no one even knows what these movies are actually called. We can just call this Rambo Last Blood.
Yeah, I mean, I when Last Blood was announced as the title, I was like, fuck yeah. I was like, AJ will love, and I was like, oh, actually, no, AJ doesn't care about Rambo titles.
Famously.
Yeah. So I guess all that's left now is, do we normally rank or continue first?
We do normally do Meeting of the Elders first, our Patreon segment.
Thank you very
where
much.
If you sign up to our Patreon and donate to the $15 Cult Elder tier, then you get invited to a secret Discord where we ask you what your thoughts are on the franchise of the week. And we got a couple of stray thoughts this week.
Do you want to read them? Because I forgot about the segment. So obviously forgot to put them in my notes.
Sure thing. So this is again on our Discord. You can find a link to our Discord in the show notes, by the way. But this is a secret room specifically for cult elders. We got a comment from Brent, who's retitled his name to Brent Rambo, and he says, the first one is so good, his nothing is over monologue at the end is one of the most authentic-looking emotional breakdowns of a man I've seen in film. It's astonishing that the guy from the first movie is the same guy from the third or fourth one. He's so flanderized. I think this is a excellent example of what flanderization means, if you've never heard that term before. Scott, You're an Inanimate Object D, says, haven't seen them before, and annoyingly couldn't find them on either Netflix or Disney Plus, so the only memory I have of them is when Charlie Sheen uses a chicken as an arrow, I believe in Hot Shots Part Dead.
Yeah. Because the first one's a parody of Top Gun, second one's a parody of Rambo 2 and 3.
Right. Dano First Bud says, curious your thoughts on Son of Rambo. If you've seen it, young Will Poulter and the only Rambo film I've seen. Very cute. What is the deal with Son of Rambo? Yeah,
so it's like Rambo with a W at the end of it.
Yeah.
It's inspired by First Blood, apparently.
In what way? Because it looks like
a coming-of-age story about two schoolboys in their attempt to make an amateur film inspired by First Blood.
Okay. All right. And Lara Last Blood says, in Mortal Kombat 11, Rambo, the T-800 from Terminator, Dark Fate, and RoboCop are DLC characters. Is this the biggest crossover of franchises covered on the pod? Maybe. It could be. I don't have all the crossovers written in front of me, but...
because I was going to say, Dead by Daylight has Ash.
That probably beats it then.
Dead by Daylight has Ash, Ghostface, and Dead by Vincent and I have played Dead by Daylight dozens of times. It's got Ash from Evil Dead. It's got Freddy from Nightmare on Elm Street. It's got Michael Myers from Halloween. Ghostface from Scream, and Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Very nice. There you go.
Is he? Yeah, he is.
Meeting adjourned.
Adjourned. Theme song pending. So, continue the franchise. There is a few continuations of the franchise. Funnily enough, there's a Far Cry 6 is getting some DLC that's a crossover with Rambo. It comes out next month. So I'll probably play that because I bought the season pass.
Interesting.
There was an animated series called Rambo: The Force of Freedom, which was a 5-episode miniseries, which then got made into like a weekly cartoon.
Inappropriate.
Yeah, for being a very there's a lot of toys and stuff.
Isn't that the most like American capitalist thing ever? To have a movie about like the crushing weight of being a war vet, and now you can buy him as an action figure.
Yeah. The Millennium Head Jeffrey Greenstein, that was a close one, said in November, he said they're officially actively developing a Rambo TV series. Stallone wants to do a prequel about before he was in Nam, and it's like he was just the perfect guy and the war ruined him.
Oh, sounds so compelling. And
yeah, like his Rocky prequel as well.
It's just Rambo like going to the malt shop and
wanting to go steady.
Yeah.
He said that he would do a 6th film if the 5th one did well, which it hasn't, so I presume he won't. But it was going to be he takes refuge in an Indian reservation. He doesn't die.
Oh, it looks like he does. Takes an Indian reservation.
Yeah, so...
We've come for all of the other indigenous people. Now, this is the tagline. He's killed all the other indigenous people of other countries. Now he's killing his own.
There's a Bollywood remake, but this is one of those ones that's like unclear if it actually came out. It's supposed to come out in 2020. But the guy that signed on to play Rambo has been like signed on to do remakes of all 5 films.
Weird.
Which isn't like, are you not going to make some of them for 40 years? Mentioned Hot Shots Part Dead. One of the kind of most interesting continuing franchises is that so Quentin Tarantino has been going around a lot and talking about his potential 10th film. He hasn't announced what it is. Talking shit, getting hit. He's been talking about what he's going to do for his 10th film, and because there's a lot riding on him because he said he's only going to do 10 films and all this stuff, and he said he talked about doing a remake of Reservoir Dogs, so like his 10th film was a remake of his first film and all this stuff. And because he said now that he's like, maybe I won't even make 10 because he sees Once Upon a Time in Hollywood as kind of being like a mic drop. But one thing that he has said that he's like, well, if I want to just ensure that for my last film I make just a good film, I could do. He wants to do, or he's thought about doing, an adaptation of the First Blood novel. Which is truer to the novel, and he would cast Adam Driver as Rambo.
Wow, his very our very own Continue the Franchise regular, always cast in my movies. Great.
But yeah, interesting that he said that he probably won't, but maybe that's the perfect last film. What's your Continue the Franchise?
Surely you can't just make a First Blood remake.
Well, you get the rights to the book and everything. It's the idea that would be you'd keep him the bloodthirsty, very Tarantino-esque character.
My Continue the Franchise is very simple. I think we are overdue for a Vietnam War movie where Vietnam soldiers are the protagonists, and it's not really related to Rambo.
It's called Vietnamese Rambo.
You could have Rambo show up and be framed in the film as the villain, maybe. I don't know. I just after watching Defy
Bloods, and he's
Bloods,
digitally de-aged as well.
Yeah. After watching Defy Bloods, it's clear that America are just so bad at truly critiquing themselves on the Vietnam War. I'd say things like Apocalypse Now, I haven't actually seen, but I've heard does an alright job, and Platoon, which we watched for Cult Popture Movie Club. That also does, but at the same time, it's always Americans leading these things, and it's what about the Vietnamese who were just hanging out, and American soldiers infiltrated their country, So I guess that's what I'm asking for is just that.
Yeah, nice. My Continue the Franchise. There's a couple ideas. One is a Rocky Rambo crossover. Don't know how you'd get Rambo into the ring.
They look the same as well, and it's just never mentioned.
Another idea is the Battle of the Johns. So you have John Wick, John McClane, John Rambo, John Connor, Johnny Storm, John Spartan from Demolition Man, also played by Sylvester Stallone.
John Constantine, also played by
John Coffey from The Green Mile. John Hammond.
Johnny Appleseed.
Jigsaw, John Kramer.
Yep.
Yeah, John Shaft from Shaft. And they just duke it out. And I actually think Rambo would stand quite a good chance because he, would bide his time, wait in the shadows. Because John Wick's probably going to be the last one standing. But then, Rambo's set a trap.
I do want to talk about John Wick because we talked, we're obviously still arguably in Keanu New Year, where we watched two Keanu Reeves film franchises back to back at the start of 2022. And we were joking what if we get John Wick next? We didn't, and we got Rambo. But the thing is the first one, John Rambo is talked about with the exact same reference as John Wick. So in a way, maybe we are continuing Keanu New Year with what's probably a very clear influence on John Wick as a series.
All right, that is Continue the Franchise. Theme song pending. We've now got a segment
pending for a long time. That one.
Called Rank That Franchise. We're over on Letterboxd, letterboxd.com/cultpopture/FFF-ranking/edit. Wait a minute, that's not for you guys to see.
Don't, now people are going to go edit it.
Yeah, so we rank that against all the other ones. So I've added First Blood here. Do you think this is above or below the Nymphomaniac Constant?
I think it might be just below the Nymphomaniac
Is it better than Pierce Brosnan Bond?
No.
Is it better than Pirates of the Caribbean?
No, I don't think so.
Is it better than The Mummy, the Brendan Fraser?
No.
Is it better than Twilight?
This is where I'm stopping, so what do you think?
Is it better than Fear Street? It's definitely better than Fear Street, I think.
It's definitely better than Fear Street. Is it better than Twilight?
Twilight has Charlie Swan, so I'm putting it below Twilight. 72.
I think that's maybe one of the most apt places we've ranked a franchise in a long time. I feel like genuine thought went into that one.
Yeah. So that comes in at number 72. Several places below his other franchise. 69 places below his other franchise, actually, which is Rocky, which is at number 3.
The fact that they're even compared is ridiculous. Like there are people out there
that prefer Rambo. How does that? Like, how gross is that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, gross.
That's actually fucking gross. So do you want to wrap up the podcast while I pull up the Patreon?
Yeah, sure thing. So we're gonna find out what our next franchise is, but before we do that, I would like to say that if you have enjoyed this episode, please consider supporting us at all the different places you can support us. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Cult Popture. You can subscribe to the various Cult Popture YouTube channels. There's one for videos, there's one for the podcast, and they're two separate channels. You can also join our Discord, which there is a link to in the show notes, and also please, if you would be so inclined, support us on Patreon. We got our 84th patron today, which is awesome and unreal. I can't believe 84 people give us money to make this silly little show. So if you have enjoyed this, get on that. You can do all sorts of things like be involved in the Cult Elders segment you heard before. You get 2 extra podcasts a month as well, one where we revisit an old franchise and explore like an extra piece of media from it, and one where we watch and review a movie chosen by patrons.
We just did an episode on the new Scream film, which I think was a good time. So check that out if you've seen new Scream.
And of course, for only $1 on our Patreon, you get to vote and suggest and vote for which every second franchise we cover on the show, and that's what we're going to do now. And Richard, this was tight. This was a hot race.
Steamy.
As steamy as the two leading options, because of course the next time we record a Film Franchise Fortnights episode, it will be approximately around
the episode comes out on Valentine's Day.
It comes out on Valentine's Day, and so we asked our patrons to suggest some romantic franchises, but we also said that's open for interpretation, so we got all sorts of non-traditionally romantic franchises suggested, but it came down to 2, and I don't know what the result is currently, but I know that
it's actually it's narrowed while we've been recording as well.
Wow.
There's only 1 vote in it.
Wow.
But yeah, so we put it out saying, hey, let's do romance franchises, and a little peek behind the curtain. I knew full well that there's one specific romance franchise, and it's exactly the one I wanted to cover. So you fell right into my trap.
Well, imagine if this
I
other
wouldn't
one
have.
came
I
from
wouldn't have
behind.
said that if I. But so anyway, it was a tightly fought race between and so the Before trilogy, which Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, Before Midnight, took a very early lead, a commanding lead. An insurmountable lead. And then later on in the week, and normally, commenting a day later is a death knell. But someone jokingly suggested...
Good word.
What?
Death knell? I don't think I've heard that said aloud before.
Mike Noyes suggested 50 Shades of Grey, and boy howdy did people get behind that. And
frankly, from a content creator perspective, yeah.
Honestly, as much of one of these is probably the best franchise ever made. I won't say which one. I actually didn't care who won, honestly. But with only 1 vote in it, the Before trilogy has won, has taken this out. There was more than 1 vote in it when we started recording. I had a look in, but someone's voted for 50 Shades in Between. There was also someone said seconding the Before trilogy, which has 5 likes. So I guess it won by
the same.
I know
same.
We can't tell, which is annoying when people comment seconding this or like explaining why. Just do it as a reply to the initial comment. Anyway, so next fortnight we'll be covering the Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, and Before Midnight, which is actually, I believe, the penultimate episode of this season, as a plan currently stands. So we'll be covering the Before trilogy, and then we'll be doing a randomly chosen, but probably not very long franchise, because while we can get the episode out, our time to record will actually be less than a fortnight. So, yeah, and then we'll be on a break for a little bit. So you'll get a few other little things in between. But yeah, I'm excited to do the that trilogy. Dimitri's just writing right now in the Cult Elders. So just to let him have his moment of the sun, I'm going to let him. I'm just going to
take
Dimitri.
Recording now.
Hurry
Go.
up. Wrapping up the app. We will say your thoughts if you get them in ASAP. I didn't actually add him. At Dimitri. All right. Oh yeah, is there anything else you want to say? I mean, what?
There was a brief pause, and then Demetrius typing started.
Yeah, I imagine frantically.
Shall I give him a countdown? 10, 9, 8, 7, 6.
Oh,
okay.
No, here he goes. Dimitri, Cold Elders meeting unadjourned.
Whoa! What's it called?
Theme song pending.
What's it called when a meeting is put back in? Is there a word for that? I've stalled for time.
Yeah, successfully. So yeah, Dimitri says, okay, my thoughts are I was surprised how nuanced the first one was, and the rest should have been Rambo going around helping random people. Yeah,
like Rambum people.
Soldier of Fortune style. I think that yeah, there is something to be said. Like as much as we talk about the sixth film not being Rambo, this isn't my Rambo. # not my Rambo 2022. But I like that should have been Rambo. Like it would have been cool if he takes mercy on someone and helps one person. You know.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, Dimitri, you got your thoughts on meeting adjourned. Podcast adjourned.
Wow, thank you. Stay tuned for the post-credit scene, which will come at you after this music ends. Welcome along, everybody, to the post-credit scene. This is a segment where at the end of each episode, if you donate to our $5 or more tiers over on patreon.com/cultpopshow, you get to give us something to talk about. And this, the post-credit scene. Richard, who's it from and what is it?
Well, Michael DeVos sent us in a post-credit scene, but I'm actually going to keep it for next week because it's to do with romance. So I think that would be a little bit fun. So, Michael, you get your name said on 2 episodes in a row. There you go. But Being Close asked us, is there a movie that just hit you at the right time, i.e. was super relevant to you when you watched it? Yeah, I think one that I can do, on either side of the scale. Marriage Story hit me very hard when I watched that. Mm-hmm. I guess mood I was in, etc. And then in terms of the other side of the scale, I would say the movies I use as examples, and in fact I used them last week, is like A Million Ways to Die in the West and Zoolander 2 are like two terrible movies that I was in the mood to laugh. And I remember going to in A Million Ways to Die in the West with my girlfriend at the time, and we sort of sat down and I said, let's no matter what, let's meet the movie on its terms. And I said, whatever the first, like anytime you see a joke in the movie, let's just laugh at it and then trick our bodies into finding it funny. I had a blast at A Million Ways to Die in the West.
That's really beautiful.
Bad movie. But it hit me at the right time, as Being Close would say.
I think that as evidenced by a lot of my work in the previous year, I think I might be like one of the world's leading fans of Borat 2. I think I rank that as like my number one movie of the year in 2020, and it just really like moved me in a way maybe more than it was intending to, and like inspired me to write I think what is one of the best video essays I've done. So yeah, that'd be my answer. Would be Borat 2.
Yeah. I hope he doesn't mind me saying this. Vincent's just DM'd me to say that he feels real stupid for forgetting about Dead by Daylight. Yeah. There you go. Nothing is sacred.